everybody. Welcome to IOTC episode 10. We have no other than the amazing Shawna Pandya on the show. Thank you, Shawna, for being on the show for IOTC.
Thank you so much for having me, Pam. It's my pleasure to be here.
Perfect. So Shawna is a citizen-scientist astronaut candidate, a physician, and her background is in neuroscience. I could add more to this list, but we'll get into this a lot. But I remember, I just wanted to share some backstory on this. That I saw your image on Instagram, and it was on a Brown Girl Global, and I just really appreciated seeing that representation and that diversity. And I'm like, here's this woman in a spacesuit. I'm like, I must meet her. And then it was just through Instagram and Facebook, and here we are. So I really appreciate seeing women in power and women of ethnicities in space and holding those roles. I think that's very important.
Oh yeah, thanks so much. It's been a wild ride so far, and every day just keeps surprising me in ways I could never imagine. So it's incredible.
I mean, seriously, like, you are the ambassador for PoSSUM 13, Leadership of Women in Space, and Project PoSSUM in and of itself is like an amazing project. Could you tell us what that is, what it entails, and what it means to be a citizen scientist astronaut candidate?
Yes, absolutely. So Project PoSSUM is an acronym for Polar Suborbital Science of the Upper Mesosphere. And basically, that is a very fancy way of saying we're interested in noctilucent clouds, in the science and the aeronomy of them. And these clouds tend to exist way up in the upper mesosphere, between 80 to 100 kilometers. And so the vision and the mission of Project PoSSUM started off with wanting to send citizen scientist astronaut candidates up in a suborbital vehicle to get more data, more high resolution video, to get atmospheric samples, thermal samples of these of these clouds. And so as a byproduct of doing the science, you would go above the 100-kilometer line where space begins, and would get the designation of being an astronaut by virtue of going that high. And so that's where we started. The term citizen scientist astronaut, basically, it's a new term. It makes the distinction that there's multiple paths through to space. When we think of astronaut, we think of the governmental space agency astronaut. We think of the NASA astronaut, the Canadian Space Agency astronaut. And certainly we've worked with those organizations. We've been supported by NASA flight opportunity grants. We worked with the CSA on our microgravity or zero gravity flight last year to do some testing for David Saint-Jacques up on the International Space Station. But ultimately, it's its own not-for-profit. And so our hope is, with the advent of the commercial space industry, that we can send citizen scientists up on suborbital flights to do some really cool science. The other way I like to think of a citizen scientist astronaut is in the context of the gentleman explorer of the 18th or the 19th century, where you would have these really passionate and curious citizens who, maybe through private wealth, maybe through sponsorship from their government, would just get on a ship and go find the Galapagos Islands.
That's so cool.
It's not necessarily part of their academic training. So it's likewise, you don't go to school to be an astronaut, but you have the passion, you have a background in science or a STEM field, and you contribute to the astronautics and the science of astronautics in that capacity.
That's amazing. It's like space adventurers. It's kind of like what, like private space adventurers sent on private missions in a way by companies, and as you're saying, however it's funded. So how did you know? Like, what is your hero's journey in like space and neuroscience? Like, how did that unfold for you? How do those two industries that you're passionate about tie together?
There's actually a lot more commonality than you would think. So I have wanted to be an astronaut my entire life. When I was a kid, you look at my junior high assignments and they're all obsessed with going to space. And so really going into neuroscience was a natural extension of that, because when I was looking for role models, I looked to none other than Roberta Bondar, Canada's first woman in space, physician, neuroscientist. And so I looked at her background and I looked at the commonalities and I said, okay, she's Canadian, I'm Canadian. She's a female, I'm a female. She is a physician, or sorry, she was a girl guide. I'm a girl guide. So all I need to do is be a neuroscientist, physician, and astronaut, and then it's complete.
Yes.
So that was the first step. And then from that dictated everything that I did. You know, I realized that you can't just go to school to get a degree in astronautology. So I thought, what am I going to do? And that medicine was the answer. And then I thought, okay, look at Dr. Bonder's background. She has a background in neuroscience. So I want to do my degree in neuroscience, and then I'm going to be a neurosurgeon. And that's, you know, how that, dictated my path when I was young. So that's really where that whole crossover between neuroscience, space, medicine started. And then from there, you know, everything that came afterwards, it was just one adventure after another.
I love that. Thank you for sharing that. And thank you for sharing for your love in space and how you're, you know, how that's magically unfolding for you.
Thank you.
So when I heard about, so I was looking at your background in International Space University. When I saw that, I thought that was something out of like a sci-fi film or something. Because I like, as a sci-fi author, I actually literally wrote about this university that floats in the Earth's atmosphere, and students go there and they hang out, and they're basically, they're like the new space explorers of this time. So like when I read that, I was like, International Space University. I'm like, what is that? What's your involvement in that? Like, I didn't even know that existed.
Yeah, that was really the springboard for my professional space career. And the first time I realized you could marry space and medicine as passions. And so when I was applying for medical schools, anyone who's ever applied to medical school knows it's incredibly competitive. It's incredibly daunting to get in. And so, you know, I was thinking to myself, I need a backup plan. You know, what happens if I don't get in? What could I be doing for that year? That I would be equally passionate about. And, you know, for me, I'd always known about this thing called the International Space University, and I thought, okay, I have to apply. And so for those unaware, the International Space University, or ISU, is a university in Strasbourg, France. Its motto is International, Intercultural, Interdisciplinary. And it is, very, very much all of those things. So in my year, we had 50 students from 31 countries, and we learned about everything related to space. We learned about space policy and law and how governmental space agencies work, and the history of space flight, the basics of orbital mechanics, the basics of launch vehicles. So it was everything related to space. It was really the foundation that I needed to start my career in space. And what was really cool is that part of that program, I got to do a internship at the European Astronaut Center Crew Medical Support Office, so a division of the European Space Agency, and contribute to research towards human spaceflight, which was incredible.
What's the recruitment process like to be like your role now? What is your recruitment process like? What drills or things do people go through in order to be like a candidate and then also be selected?
Sure, yeah. So it depends where you're referring to. So for PoSSUM, we say applicants need to have a background in, need to have a bachelor's degree in a STEM field, so science, technology, engineering, medicine. And they need to have a scuba diving open water license, and ideally a pilot's license, although that's a nice to have, not a need to have. And then we also have.
You're getting, right? You're getting a pilot's license, correct?
Yeah, I am. Yeah, I am. And then we have streams for people who may not have that STEM background. We have the PoSSUM Academy, which is for high school students and undergraduate students. So we try to be very accessible. So that's the entry requirements. And then you go through the ground school, which is like this 4.5-day aeronomy boot camp. And of course, you've done the online courses before. And in the boot camp, the ground school, you're doing more science, you're going through the mission simulation, you're getting suited up in the IVA spacesuit, you're sitting in a suborbital vehicle simulator, doing the mission steps, everything from deploying the cameras, deploying the instruments, gathering high resolution imagery. You're experiencing aerobatic flight. So if you've ever been to an air show and seen these airplanes do their loop-to-loops, you get to experience that to know what a changing G load is like.
Yeah.
You also get to do some emergency simulation. So you spend some time in a hypoxic, hypobaric decompression chamber where you experience slow onset hypoxia. So if your atmosphere has a leak and is slowly being drained of oxygen, how does your body respond? You know, do you get tunnel vision? Do you get gray outs? Do you get some warm fuzzies in your chest? And it's to know, you know, this is how I reacted. So if it happens in real life, you have the presence of mind to grab your oxygen mask, slam it on, and save your own life and potentially your crewmates as well.
What are like some of the missions that people are going to be sent on in the Earth's atmosphere, correct? Like what are some of the typical, I wouldn't say typical, but what are some of the missions like, the projects?
So the first one would be the one we talked about at the beginning of the podcast. So really it would be on a suborbital flight. You would plan to be the data gatherer for everything about these noctilucent clouds. So we care about these clouds because they're a relatively new meteorological phenomenon, and they're relatively recent in our records. We've only seen evidence of them since the late 1800s, and they're thought to be a marker of climate change because they're becoming more prevalent. They're appearing in regions that are not polar. And so the role of the scientist would be to operate the high resolution video and photographic cameras, to deploy the atmospheric sampler at the right time, to deploy the thermal probe at the right time, all of those things. So that's would be one of the suborbital flights. Things we've done so far, we may not have been up into space yet, but we've done some really cool things. So every year since 2015, I've been lucky enough to be part of the parabolic flight campaign or zero gravity campaign in the National Research Council in Ottawa, and we've been testing spacesuits in zero gravity to help improve their technology readiness level and see how they move, how they react when the visor's down and the spacesuit's pressurized. We've been to northern Alberta. We've been to high level Alberta, where we have conducted noctilucent cloud campaigns using a tomography instrument, flying in an unpressurized research craft, using this instrument to try to get more high resolution data on these clouds. We've tested our spacesuits in crash landing scenarios and tested how they react in the water. So it's been a wild ride, and everything that has come next has surpassed my expectations. And the team, the quality of the people that you work with, their intelligence, their integrity, their abilities as teammates has just been incredible to experience.
How do you, with all that given, like there's so much like information data coming in, and then I consider you a high performer. Like you set a goal and you go and you accomplish it, How do you center your gravity through all of that? Like, how do you keep yourself centered? Like, do you meditate? Do you like take your downtime? Like, how do you navigate all those?
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's really, I really always advise people to know yourself, because, know what gets you up and know what gets you down. And then also know the science and the psychology of what makes a good day. And I once heard a clinical psychologist say that what's known to make a good day is either doing something that's pleasurable or doing something that's productive. So, if you love playing a video game and you find that pleasurable, and you do that for a short time, maybe that contributes to having a good day. If you find getting stuff done, if you find cleaning and being productive that way gets things done and helps contribute towards a good day, by all means do that. So for me, I know personally I'm 50% introvert, 50% extrovert. So I love the public events where I get to meet people and talk about what I do.
Yeah.
But also I absolutely need my downtime. And for me, just going to the gym, putting on my headphones, working out, and just decompressing that way is really crucial to me.
And learning languages.
Yes, yeah. And so we had talked about that, but for me, I make sure I spend a little bit of time, about 20 minutes every day, doing a little bit of language learning, whether it's Russian or Spanish. And it's, you know, for me, it's, you know, totally unrelated to everything else, but it's fun. And it's, you know, it's not always easy. In fact, I find Russian quite hard, but it's a lot of fun to learn. So
That's awesome. That's awesome. No, I have a deep respect for people who learn languages because it really connects humanity and people together. And B, I just find it difficult in general. I mean, it's just whatever. But can you tell me more about your involvement as the ambassador for PoSSUM 13, the leadership in women role? Because I'm really interested in that.
yeah, absolutely. So the PoSSUM 13 is a nod to the Mercury 13, which was, it's such a cool origin story. In fact, there's some documentaries on Netflix now about it. And so the Mercury 13 were created, there were 13 women pilots and aviators, many of whom who had flown in the Second World War, and, you know, were just outstanding pilots who were funded by William Lovelace at the same time as the Mercury 8 were being selected, and he wanted to know how these women would perform. And in every case, they performed as good as or even better than the 8 Mercury astronauts. And so they were really making the case for women should go to space. And so that was the original Mercury 13. These women performed, you know, incredibly well. But they never flew. And so the PoSSUM 13 was created to honor that memory, but also going forward, encourage young women and students and underrepresented groups who may not otherwise have exposure or an ability to pursue their passion for science. And so we created this group in January of this year with that goal, and we have 13 ambassadors currently. I'm the co-chair for strategic development for that group, and we've just wrapped up running our first competition, which was geared at 13 to 17-year-old student groups, female-led groups that propose a scientific payload for us to fly on our parabolic flight campaign this October. So we're bringing students into space science, and we're letting them fly their payload 0G, and also helping mentor them through the process. So that was the first step, and that's just in the first 8 months of PoSSUM 13. So it's really exciting for all of us.
What's the future of space? Because I'm hearing there about, you know, like the youth involvement and the leadership of like, where do you see space exploration going? Because we have, you know, the CEOs heading out into like mining meteors to inhabiting, colonizing Mars, so to say, and like, where do you see us going?
Yeah, that's a great question. So there's so many ways to answer that, but I think my hypothesis, and I think this has been borne out, is that access to space is a form of empowerment. And when we look at the landscape and the diaspora of what space access used to look like, it used to be the Soviet Union and the United States. And then it expanded to the big five, to Japan, the European Space Agency, CSA, in addition to those two. And now if you look at the landscape of what space access and governmental space agencies looks like, there are over 40 major space agencies, with new ones cropping up all the time. You know, Australia finally has a space agency now. The Philippines finally created a space agency. And the reason why is it's not just about human exploration, but it's about what we can get by satellites, by remote sensing satellites, by telecommunication, by Earth observation. You know, we can learn more about agricultural patterns, about migrant populations, about tracking endangered species. And so I argue that access to space is access to economic development, to infrastructure, to data. So it's so important. So we need to give more countries access to space, and at an individual level, we need to open up access to space for private citizens. And so, you know, with the suborbital vehicle, suborbital spaceflight industry, that's a first step. And a thought experiment. And the argument I give for that is, you know, what happens if we open up space, not just to scientists and astronauts and pilots, but what happens if we give access to artists and entrepreneurs, and, you know, and athletes? You know, what are they going to do with that medium? So that's closer to home. And then, you know, when we talk about the big picture vision, the ambitious, complex missions, you know, about sending humans to the moon and humans to the Mars, humans to Mars, I think it's you know, there's that survival argument. You know, we often facetiously say in the space industry, you know, asteroids are nature's way of saying, how's that space program coming along? And you know, there really is a survival argument for extending beyond the cradle of Earth, absolutely. But also, you know, the discovery, the fundamental human innate trait to discover, and in discovering, learning more about our own state in the universe, and also, you know, progressing our own knowledge to turn that into technology, and to turn that into application that can help us both in space and on Earth. So in my mind, there's absolutely 100% a prerogative to continue manned or human and robotic space exploration.
Thank you for that, because I fully felt all of that. Like, there's such an excitement and, like you said, that innate curiosity in human nature to explore. And then, I mean, it's just the beginning. When you were touching upon like wilderness and you know, going into like foreign lands or foreign territory, does that tie in like with your EVA? It's called 101 Space and Wilderness Medicine. Is that like how we as humans inhabit other planets? And also, as you were touching on, it's like, you know, with satellite information, how do we even understand Earth now? Because Earth is like this living, moving biological organism. She's alive and she's changing as we speak to better understand her or Earth better.
So yeah, my course is called EVA. It started off being called EVA 101. Now it's called EVA 102. And so we love our acronyms in the space world. So EVA stands for extravehicular activity, and so the common parlance is spacewalk. So when you see an astronaut outside the International Space Station, when you see the Apollo astronauts walking on the moon, they're performing an EVA. And so this is where I really get to marry my backgrounds in medicine and space. And we created a course. It initially started off being called Space and Wilderness Medicine. And we taught the participants the basics of wilderness medicine and triage and making critical go, no go, evacuation, don't evacuate type of decisions in, you know, in resource limited, highly critical situations. And then we threw in some space medicine and some space medicine scenarios. And now we're evolving the course to look at all of that again, but in the context of EVA service operations. So it's really cool for me because this is, you know, this is of everything I am passionate about. This is everything that I love, and to be able to make a course around it, to be able to give back to the PoSSUM organization, you know, that I've gotten so much out of is pretty fantastic.
Thank you. I wanted to touch on this, like when you were at the European Space Station. I can't remember what the acronym for that was again, but okay. So with that, you're mentioning about like law, and this is like a fascinating, like this is a curious question of mine. It's like when we explore other planets and other systems, like who legally owns space? You know, like how do you own air? You know, who's entitled to that? And even going to Mars, it's like, is it like this mission, like who's there first kind of thing? And it's like, you know, like, I don't know. I was fascinated by that because, you know, and then having other countries, as you said, like involved and encouraging that, it's like, it's kind of like the race to space that reminds me of like the Kennedy era, but like, it's kind of like where's that, like who owns what is what I'm trying to ask. Like it's
yeah, it's still, but that's a great question that you asked, because believe it or not, this is entrenched in law, starting with the 1967 Outer Space Treaty. And in fact, later on, there was a Moon Treaty. And, you know, the Outer Space Treaty had had a majority of signatories from around the world, and agreeing to the peaceful use of space, agreeing to non-ownership, agreeing to non-weaponization of space. But of course, like these aren't truly enforceable, and the second you make commercial argument for space, you know, it's easy to imagine that one or more actors will, you know, lay claim to space, or, you know, supersede the statutes of that treaty. Fairly recently, the U.S. Congress also passed a U.S. commercialization act as well, essentially, you know, endorsing the U.S. commercialization of space. So there's definitely debates. There's definitely national and international legislation around it,
Okay.
as to how enforceable it is and who's going to abide by it. For example, if we currently have Europe, we have the Americas, we have Canada, we have China, we have India, all proposing to go back to the moon.
Yeah.
That's and many, if not most of those entities are planning to go back there to stay. How are we going to, abide by the statutes outlined in these treaties if we, and what are we going to do if someone violates these rules?
Yeah.
So we have to also accept that the nature of space exploration, the way in which we use space, our technologies, may be changing. Who uses space? Commercial entities and private entities as well. So there's definitely a lot of debate and legislation, but it's not. It's also up for discussion and debate and revisitation.
So it's literally new territory.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. No, thank you for sharing that, so it's nice to know that there's something that's established, and then there's this whole growth because it's new territory and we're kind of like setting a new precedence in that area. So that's amazing. Singularity University, please tell me what that is. Who founded that? And I'm going into sci-fi land with that, but I'm going to let you answer what all that's about.
Yeah, so Singularity University was founded by two of the three founders of the International Space University. Mm-hmm. And their whole mandate was, everything I'm passionate about, big ideas, big problems, accelerating technologies. So the way they phrased it was, how would you positively impact 1 billion people in 10 years using accelerating technology? And when I heard about this, I was like, I'm sold, I have to be part of this. And so I was in medical school at the time, but I was lucky enough to get accepted. And we were 40 students from 17 countries. And we spent the summer learning about grand challenges, whether it's climate change, energy, water, healthcare, but also learning about, recent developments in AI, in autonomous vehicles, in smartphones. And we were challenged to pair these solution spaces with these problem spaces. And so this was so cool because it was just Disneyland for nerds, essentially.
I love that.
We were based at NASA Ames campus in Silicon Valley. We were funded by Google, and you were driven by passion and by working on really hard problems. And so at the end of the summer, we formed into smaller teams. I worked with a team of 9 people from 7 countries, and we worked on disaster response. And we essentially said, what's a problem that could affect anyone, anywhere, anytime? And for us, the answer was natural and man-made disasters. And this was 2009. This was when smartphones were becoming a thing. And so for the first time, we had geolocation aware abilities. And so we asked, what if we could do disaster response better? What if we could empower offices of emergency management to based on where a citizen is, give them location-specific information saying, hey, user, we see you're by 45th and 6th. There's a gas leak there. Here's your path to safety. And also, making that technology compatible with networks that were fully available, partially available, and not at all available. So, dealing with the real life challenge of not having a network. So it was incredible, and just the network and the caliber of people and their backgrounds and everything they've achieved. It's sort of like you walk in there, like anything, like medicine, like the first time you attend PoSSUM ground school, you walk in there just wondering if it was an accident that you got in, and then the people become teammates and lifelong friends, and it's just part of an incredible journey and challenge, and it really was instrumental in shaping my medical career and the way in which I view challenges as opportunities, and really it was also my first foray into entrepreneurship.
Right, with creating it's like a disaster response.
Yeah, that was Civic Art, and so it was you hear all these quote unquote startup hustle, you hear all about that, but actually living it is quite something else, wearing multiple hats, making connections, going to conferences, writing grants, reviewing your technology, working on partnerships to deploy your technology and to run a pilot, like all of that. It's very fluid, very operational, very fast paced, and a lot of fun.
Oh gosh, so a couple of things that came out from that. One of the insights I find, like from your stories and your sharing, is that space seems to, it just brings people from different nationalities, regardless of age, sex, gender, all of that, together on literally like one mission, and you get to meet all like-minded people, and just, I don't know, I just feel like it's breaking boundaries instead of creating them, So I really appreciate that international feel of like we're all in this together, like hashtag Team Planet Earth it.
Yeah, absolutely. And you hear astronauts who've been up to space, Ron Guerin, Anusha Ansari, they're very passionate about promoting the overview effect of going up to space and just seeing you can't see boundaries, you can't see borders, and really bringing that down to earth, and promoting that unity, and working together rather than against each other to solve problems. And I think that's one of the consequences of spaceflight that we haven't talked about, but it's crucial, and it might even be the key towards a lot more diplomacy and cooperation.
Yeah. When you were touching on earlier with the multiple projects and setting the goals, I kind of wanted to touch on like how happiness fits with like high performance and the achievement of goal, and how do you, I mean, we hear this with like a lot of athletes, it's like always pushing the boundaries, and it's like, how do you find, is the happiness in the achievement of the goal, is it in the being of the goal, or is it in you becoming of it?
Yeah, I think there's a few answers to that. I think the first answer is that you have to know what motivates yourself. So, some people always ask, why do you work so hard? Why do you do all these crazy things? Why? And for me, that's what makes me happy. Just pushing the limits, trying new things, gaining new skills. That's really important to me. But I think the bigger context, that may not work for everyone. Some people may hate that lifestyle. That's totally fair. And I think the bigger context is the message of happiness and what it takes to be happy. And I think we perpetuate these unfair myths of happily ever after, starting when we're kids. We read our fairy tale story, and then suddenly hand waving and magic happens, and happiness is supposed to follow. And unfortunately, that's ingrained. And then I think that's part of why we have so many people saying, I'm not happy. Aside from pathology and aside from medically diagnosable mental health conditions, but just looking at your day-to-day, are you miserable versus are you happy? Happiness is a responsibility that we have to ourselves, and it's like a relationship, but it's like a relationship with yourself. It takes a lot of work, and so we have the duty to create our own happiness and to realize what forges that path towards happiness versus what takes away from it, and to be strict with ourselves and say, okay, I'm keeping myself in this environment that keeps me unhappy day after day after day. So what is my responsibility towards myself, to take myself away from this environment and keep me and make me happy? Or, if I do this and this and this, as hard as it may be, if I work out consistently every day, that makes me happy, even if it out of my way, even if it makes my day longer, but it ultimately makes me happy. So viewing happiness as, a responsibility, not as something that we're entitled to, and that something gives us power towards shaping our own happiness. And certainly I don't mean to say it's as easy as that. Certainly there's certain parts of the population for which we get into talking about pathological, diagnosable mental health conditions, and that's not what I'm talking about. But I'm talking about day-to-day happiness. And I think viewing it as something that we have a lot of control over and have a duty to spend time nurturing and investing in is a really productive way to go about investing in happiness.
That's amazing because I like happiness is a responsibility. Like you were just saying, happiness is a responsibility that we have to ourselves. That's huge because a lot of times it's like that's just huge. I'm not even gonna add anything on that. That's like a really big takeaway. So thank you for sharing that. All right, so I usually finish this off with like, what's next for Shawna? Like, what could possibly be next for you on your roadmap? Like 6 months, a year, 5 years, somewhere down the road.
So really excited about the months that are coming up ahead. So with all this exploration and adventuring and space exploration, I've also gotten involved in ocean science and ocean exploration. I did my first dive medicine and underwater course and stay at the world's only underwater research lab at Aquarius Reef Base earlier this summer, and that's where NASA and the DSA and CSA train their astronauts. So spending a night there was incredible. And so as an extension of that, I'm working with a crew of 5, and we are doing our first 5-day underwater mission at a different undersea lodge. This is called Jules Undersea Lodge. So that'll be in October. Going back to Ottawa for some parabolic flight testing, doing our first foray into EVA suit testing. So we've been doing IVA suit, intravehicular suit testing previously. So that's all in October. Lots of travel, lots of conferences. So it's gonna be a whirlwind. It's gonna be fantastic, and I'm so excited for this fall.
I absolutely love that, everything about that. And I wanted to actually finish us off with a quote that you said on one of your TED Talks, which was, I don't know where I'll be in 10 years from now, but I know this. Lives are long and full of surprises. So here is to surprises for everybody involved, all the audience, yourself, myself, what is going to be for not only like the planet Earth, but for the individuals who inhabit that. So thank you so much for being you. Thank you for being a spark in the cosmos. And thank you for being on IOTC.
Thank you so much for having me. This is a lot of fun.
All right. Later, Shawna. And thank you, everybody, for watching. We're going to have some cool links below, even a reference to the clouds that we were talking to earlier. I'll have a link below and where to find Shawna. Where can people find you, actually? I'll have it in the link in the bio, but.
Sure, yeah. So my website is Shawna Pandya, SHAWNAPANDYA.com. You can find me at Shawna Pandya on Twitter and Instagram, and on Facebook, Dr. Shawna Pandya.
And you're going to wave at us when you're in outer space, right?
Yeah, I'll wave to you now as well.
Done. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Pam. Have a great day. Thanks, everyone, for listening.
Thank you.